Far too long. I'm sorry, I've been very busy, but I won't waste any more time. It's already been 9 months. Should we get cracking on chapter 10? I hope the volume is good. I hope you can hear me. I'm not sure how good the microphone is on this camera. I say without further ado, but hang on, let me drink. I think we're on chapter 10. Oh. Chapter 10, The Lights of China. My family's fortune had changed forever, and never did that seem clearer than during the New Year celebration at my uncle Park Jin's house in February 2007. When I was young, my father was the richest in his clan, and everybody came to enjoy the holidays at our house. But now, my uncle was the wealthy one who hosted the parties, and instead of treating my father like a brother, he ordered him around like a servant. In fact, during the months that my father had lived with my aunt and uncle in Hyesan after getting out of prison, if you remember, her dad was arrested. He got caught smuggling iron with short steel, which everybody does. But anyway, he got caught, and he was only recently out of prison. And of course, once you get arrested or something, your entire social status just goes through the floor. The family blamed my father for ruining their lives. Oh, I think I missed a line here. They had made him sweep and clean the house. The family blamed my father for ruining their lives. Their songbun status, that's the family status, had never been very good in the first place. And now, because he was a convicted criminal, it was much worse. Even my cousins mistreated him in front of his family and former friends. At the New Year's celebration, they wouldn't let him sit and talk with the neighbors who used to eat and drink at his table. It was an extraordinarily difficult evening, but my father accepted it with weary resignation. Before he was arrested, my father had been a brilliant, funny, irreverent man. But even as a 13-year-old girl, I could tell that his time in the prison camp had broken his spirit. He couldn't look a policeman in the face, not even the ones who used to joke and drink with him at his table. My father used to love South Korean music, but now he refused to listen to it. He was afraid someone might hear it and report him. He sang only one song after he came out of the camp. Our country is worthier than my life, with the lyrics, the green forest flutters in our land and mountains, and I didn't plant even one tree. He wasn't the same person I'd known as a child. I was so grateful when the New Year's party was over and we could finally leave. It was 2.5 miles from my uncle's house to our department building. My father had stayed behind while my mother and sister and I walked home by ourselves along the dark river, guided only by flashes of light from the fireworks in the sky over China. I lived in North Korea, the country where we were supposed to have nothing to envy, and all I felt was envy. Desperate envy for the people on the other side of the river. I still don't dare to think about why we couldn't have so many things in North Korea. But I knew I wanted to go where there was light and food. It was like I was being drawn to a flame without thinking why. I wish I'd known at the time, but what light really meant to North Koreans like me. Following it would cost me my innocence, and for a while, my humanity. Every New Year, Kim Jong-il gave a statement that we all had to memorize. In 2007, It was more of the same. The North Korean people were stronger, our enemies would be defeated, the economy was getting better. Oh shit, look at that. People saying hello. Hello. Yes, it's been 9 months since the last one, so I'll just get on with it. I've wasted enough time. It's nice to see you all. But we could no longer believe the propaganda because our lives were just getting worse. My parents finally could take no more. They knew their daughters had no future here, so they began to discuss a way out. We knew a man who had gone to work in Russia. It was basically slave labor, but at least he was fed, so he didn't starve. And he was able to save enough money to start a successful business when he came back. My father knew another man who was sent to Libya as part of a labor force that earned foreign currency for the regime. When he returned, he told us that his life in Libya was very lonely. For 3 years he didn't see his family, but he could eat, and sometimes he even ate chicken wings. We were all so hungry. We wanted to hear every detail. The chat's lively, wow. We were all so hungry, we wanted to hear every detail. He said that the Libyans ate lots of chicken, which was astounding to us, because they don't usually eat the whole bird. They cut off the wings and sold them for so little, even North Koreans could afford them. Libya sounded like a paradise to us. My father had wanted to go abroad and hoped he would find a way to make us some money to send back to us. But he never took the opportunity. Are you from England? Yes, you can tell from the sound of my ridiculous accent. And send some money back to us. But he never took the opportunity, and now it was out of the question. North Koreans have always been told that the rest of the world was an impure, disgusting, and dangerous place. Worst of all was South Korea, which was a human cesspool. No more than an impoverished colony of the American bastards we were all taught to hate and fear. My father had no desire ever to go to South Korea, but China was different. Maybe if we could find a way to get across the river, we might have a chance. My parents discussed their options in voices so quiet, not even a mouse could hear them. We still had some relatives living in China, but my parents had no way to get in touch with them. Maybe if we could make it across the border, we could find them and ask for their help. We all knew they were rich over there. We had seen Chinese television. He's laughing because that joke I made about my accent. We'd all seen Chinese television and all the luxuries it advertised. We knew people who had visited China legally, including Uncle Park Jin, and they said that the Chinese all had plenty to eat. There were also rumors that young North Korean women could easily find jobs in China. A number of teenage girls had dropped out of sight recently, and people were whispering they had gone to China. Maybe Yeonmi, that's the sister of the main character. Maybe Yeonmi, wait, yes, that's one of her sisters, yes. I can't remember if that's the older one or the younger one. Maybe Yeonmi and I could find work too. My mother had also heard that in China there were not enough children. And because my sister and I were still very young, we might find people who would adopt us. But in a place without an internet or an outside newspaper, it was impossible to get reliable information. If you asked too many questions, you could be reported. So we had no idea if any of these rumors were true. My parents knew the black market, but they sold the metal only to smugglers who brought it to China. They had no connections of their own on the other side of the border. Ordinary smugglers didn't trade in people. That was a much more dangerous operation, and surveillance was too tight to risk crossing the river alone. We would need a broker to bribe the border guards to guide us across. But where would we find one? Hello. Hello, chat. Oh, that's nice. My parents asked Yeonmi and me to see if we could discreetly ask around. I know it's Yeonmi and I, which is the correct English, but I'm reading it word for word. And I don't know if they leave that in there just so it's ad verbatim. They probably only clean up the bad spelling, though. I don't know if that's actually a reflection of their education level or if it's just a misprint in the book, but I don't know. Penguin are usually pretty good at these things. Anyway, my parents asked Yeonmi and me to see if we could discreetly ask around and find out how the other girls were getting into China. My father urged my mother to go with us too, if she could find a way. He would stay behind, he said, because he didn't think he could find work across the river. And he was worried about the family he would leave behind in North Korea. When women escaped to China, the government didn't get all that upset about it, and the relatives were usually not punished. But if a man like my father was to defect, the government would be very hard on his brother and sisters and their families. They might lose their jobs as doctors and professors, or even be sent to prison. Even though my uncle had treated him badly, my father still felt loyalty to his family. Besides, he didn't think that we would be very far away. After you go to China, and once you are doing great, come down to the river at New Year, he told us. Go to the beach where we always swim and wash our clothes. I will meet you there. My sister and I started asking our friends if they knew anything, and I kept my ears open for any information. One day, I overheard a strange story from a woman from the neighborhood was telling her friends. She said she knew a young woman who had crossed the river and started knocking on doors in Changbai. Some people let her in and gave her lots of delicious food and some pretty new clothes. Then they told her they wanted her to marry their son. She was not happy with the arrangement and tried to come back to Hyesan the way she came. But this time she was captured and arrested by North Korean border guards. One of the neighbors remarked that the girl was stupid to reject such a generous offer. I had no idea what she was talking about. Looking back, I wonder how we all could have been so naive. None of us even knew the concept of human trafficking, and couldn't imagine anything so evil as selling other people. And we weren't really capable of critical thinking, because we had been trained not to ask questions. I actually thought that if we could just cross that river without being arrested or shot by the soldiers, Yeonmi and I would be okay then. But then, when you are so hungry and desperate, you are willing to take any risks in order to live. Even as we were planning our escape, I have a very stiff shoulder. I was still secretly seeing Chun Gwen. Our relationship was so innocent. We had never even held hands. One night, when my building was completely dark, we stood in the stairwell at the end of the hall, where an open window looked over the river. As always, the lights from Changbai glowed in the distance. That's one of the closest sort of village city types things that's just across the North Korean border into China. So it's like the closest village to North Korea in the distance. I was cold, so he draped his jacket over my shoulders and put his arms around me. I asked him, what would it be like living there in all that brightness? I don't know, he said. I couldn't tell him about our plans to go there. It didn't matter anyway, because I knew he was leaving to start his military career, his military service in April. Usually young men go into the army for 10 years, but because his parents were so rich and powerful, It was arranged that he would only have to serve for 2 years. Then he would go to university. His brilliant future was already laid out for him, but he told me he wanted me to wait for him. My family was still new enough in the neighborhood that he hadn't heard about my bad background. 8 years, Yeonmi, he said. Wait for me that long, and I'm going to marry you. He said he would find a way to come see me every month, no matter what. It broke my heart to hear him. Suddenly, those lights I had always longed for seemed so cruel to me. The next morning, Chun Guen came by to pick me up for a trip to the Jangmadang in Hyesan. I think that's one of the markets. It was bad weather, so he paid for a motorcycle taxi to take us. It was a little bit different from a regular motorcycle because it had 4 wheels and an open trunk in the back. We climbed into the trunk and covered up under a tarp to keep out of the cold rain. When we arrived at the market, he told me to pick out any necklace that I liked. I chose the pendant in the shape of a key. He told me he was the owner of the key. That would open my heart. I smiled at him, but inside my heart was like stone. I could not find a broker to take us to China. But Yeonmi thought she had found one. She didn't know the name yet, but she said we would have to go soon. Spring was coming, and the river would melt if we didn't leave quickly. But before we can make a plan, I woke up one morning with a high fever. What's wrong, my daughter? I heard my mother's voice from far away. I was so sick I couldn't even open my eyes. Then I started throwing up. Before long, I had broken out in big red splotches all over my body. I felt like I was going to die. We heard rumors that a bad virus had crossed into our country from China, but nobody knew what to do about it. My mother borrowed money to buy some medicine for me, but days passed and I wasn't getting better. I had a terrible pain in my stomach and I couldn't keep any food down. I was getting so skinny and weak I couldn't even walk, so they took me to the hospital. After the doctors examined me, they decided that my appendix had to come out. Because of my father's experience as a young man, my parents believed it was the only way to save my life. Even though we were supposed to have free medical care, the doctors expected us to pay them for the surgery. It sounds harsh, but the government gave them almost nothing, and bribery was the only way for them to survive. Somehow my parents persuaded the doctors to perform the operation if we supplied them with the anesthetic and the antibiotics they needed. My mother went to our old neighborhood and borrowed 20,000 won, enough to buy 50 pounds of rice. It's a decent amount of money. From Kim Jong-ai, the kind woman who had lived next door to us. Then used the money to buy drugs on the black market. When the doctors opened my stomach, they discovered it wasn't my appendix after all, just badly inflamed intestines. They removed my appendix anyway, gave me a strong antibiotic, and began to close me up. But the small amount of anesthetic they gave me did not last long, and I woke up before the surgery was finished. I can't even describe the pain. They had to hold me down because I was screaming so much. They thought I would lose my mind, but they finished the surgery anyway. My mother brought me some painkillers, and I finally passed out. I don't know if any of you have ever felt like surgery scalpels when you've got a reduced amount of painkillers, but it's not a very nice thing. I do have a story to tell you where a similar thing happened to me, which was all completely self-inflicted, and so I don't expect any sympathy. But I had a cyst. Was it a cyst? It was a cyst. It wasn't an abscess. Yeah, abscesses are funny shapes and they can get bigger. This was a cyst. completely benign, and so the NHS was not willing to operate. But it was rather large and ugly, and it was massive, and it was right here. So I made the wise decision to do it myself. And ice will definitely make your face numb, but it doesn't last long enough, especially when you're trying to cut a cyst out of your face. And that's just, yeah, using a scalpel, having a scalpel being used on you, whether someone else is doing it or you're doing it to yourself, it hurts. It's not a fun feeling. So, and that was just a small cut. That was just a small cut here to get a lump out of my face. That just, I imagine this was a much larger cut. And of course, she's 13 while this is happening. So it's going to be a lot more horrible when you're at that age than someone at my age who constricted, subjected myself to that. Hello, chat. Anyway, that's enough segueing. I'll get back to it, shall I? I thought I would lose my mind, but they finished the surgery anyway. Later, my mother brought me some painkillers, and I finally passed out. The next thing I remember, I was in a hospital room, with my mother sitting next to me. The beds were all full, so they put me on a pallet on the floor. My mother was stroking my hand, and after a while I noticed there was a ring on my finger. It was gold-coloured with little glass jewels on the top. "Where did this come from, Uma?" I asked groggily. "Chun Gwen was here when you were sleeping," he said. He had brought some snacks and juice and the ring to surprise me after my operation, but I would not wake up. She said she held my hand for a while and then put the ring on my finger before he left. Later he came back to check on me, and the first thing he did was look at my hand. "It makes me happy to see you wearing that ring, Yeonmi," he said. I did my best to smile, and I showed him how loose it was on my finger. "It's too big," I said. "Then you'll have to get better and gain some weight." He came back to visit me almost every day while I recovered, and I was always happy to see him. I've never seen the chat this busy. Hello, everyone. Like I said, it's been long enough, so I'm just going to get on with it. I don't think it's been 9 months since the last upload. Has it been 2 years? That's quite a gap. Then you'll have to get better and gain some weight. He came back to visit me almost every day while I recovered, and I was always so happy to see him. My mother remained at my bedside. Because we had no money to bribe them, the nurses ignored me. My mother had to do everything, from keeping my incision clean to giving me whatever food she could find. The hospital was poorly equipped and filthy. To use the bathroom, I had to get up and cross an open courtyard to reach the outhouse. At first, I was too weak to stand. But once I was well enough to walk to the bathroom, I discovered that the local hospital used the courtyard to store the dead. The whole time I was staying there, several bodies were stacked like wood between my room and the outhouse. Jesus Christ. More horrible were the rats that feasted on them day and night. It was the most terrible sight I had ever seen. The first thing the rats ate are the eyes, because that is the softest part of the body. I can still see those hollow red eyes. They come to me in my nightmares, and I wake up screaming. My mother couldn't believe the hospital just left the bodies out there in the open. "Why can't you take these people away and bury them?" she demanded when a nurse walked by. The nurse shrugged. "The government won't come and collect the bodies until there are 7 of them." "That's only 5, she said. Then she walked away. My mother had fought to hold on to her belief that she lived in a good country. She was shocked and saddened to realize how corrupt and pitiless North Korea had become. Now she was even more convinced that she couldn't let her daughters grow up in such a place. We had to get out as soon as possible. The doctors told us I had to stay in that hellish hospital for 7 days before they could remove my stitches. By now, it was the end of March, and time was running out to cross the frozen river. But I was still too weak to travel. On March 25th, the day before I was due to be released, my sister came to visit the hospital while my mother was with me. She told us she couldn't visit anymore. Oh, she told us she couldn't wait anymore. So she'd have found her broker to take her to China. She was 16 years old now, and starting to make her own decisions. Even though Mother pulled her aside and begged her to wait for me, Yeonmi said no. I'm leaving tonight with my friend's sister. If I don't take this opportunity, there may not be another. To my mother, she acted like this trip to China was not such a big deal. That she would just visit a neighborhood on the other side and maybe come right back. But Mother didn't think this sounded right. She couldn't persuade her to stay. Later that night, Yeonmi showed up at the hospital again. We couldn't go tonight, she said. See, it's not so easy to escape, Mother said. You wait, said my sister. We've made another appointment to go tomorrow night. Iran, Jesus Christ. Well, I have terrible internet, so I hope you're actually getting this without a bunch of lag. Chapter 11, I'm just taking a break. Chapter 11 is called Missing. Oh, I might actually boil the kettle. You'll notice the background is different. I'm living somewhere new. But I won't make a tea. I'll just have the water. I'll have a... I'll finish this smoke break, and we'll do chapter 11. We'll do 2 chapters because it's been so long. So I'll have to rename this video chapter 10 and 11. Where are you from? I'm from England. Can't you tell by my ridiculous accent? Just give you a chance to take in the hospital and the dead people that apparently just litter the space between the toilet and the beds. Well, the toilet and the pallet, because the beds were full, so she had to lay on a pallet. Probably quite like the ones you get in Tesco and Asda. So that sounds like fun. Okay, chapter 11. Chapter 11, Missing. The next day. How's the sound levels, by the way? You speak too fast. As a foreigner, I can't understand you well. Oh, I'm sorry, I can try and slow it down. But you see, I usually speak slow, and I was worried that these things take too long. I can always slow it down a bit. But everyone else, let me know if I'm taking too much time. That means I can smoke more while I'm reading. So it's kind of a good thing. The next day, my uncle borrowed a car to take me home from the hospital. My family was hoping the doctors would remove my stitches and release me, but they refused because we still owed them money. And so I had to stay another night. My sister dropped by later with her friend. Yeonmi was dressed in thin black clothes, and her hair was tied back. When we told her that I could still not leave, she whispered to my mother so that the other patients couldn't hear, "I'm sorry, I'm going tonight." My mother didn't believe that she would make it on her own. She just said, "Yeah, okay, you'll be back." She didn't hug her or even say goodbye. It was something she would regret for many years. I still cry when I think about that night. We didn't know how desperate Yeonmi was. My father had made me a special dish in which you scoop out a potato and fry it with oil and spices. It was a rare and expensive treat, but he was worried because I was so skinny and had not eaten anything solid for many days. So he made me this special meal and gave it to Yeonmi to bring to me. But I was feeling too sick to eat that night. "I'm just not hungry, sister," I said. "Do you mind if I eat it then?" "No, please do," I said. At that, she sat down next to me and stuffed the potato cake into her mouth so fast it looked like somebody was trying to steal the food from her. "That was delicious," she said a few seconds later. "Please don't tell Father I ate it." I promise. It's still too painful to think about that time. That's all any of us wanted. Just to eat. My mother stayed with me that night. When Yeonmi did not return as before, we assumed she had just gone home to the apartment. But at 5 o'clock in the morning, when my father walked into my room, he was shaking. "Where's Yeonmi?" he said. "Is she here?" "No," said my mother. "She's not with you?" "No," he said. "She never came home." Yeonmi was gone. My mother never thought she would go through with her plan alone. And now she blamed herself. She was so upset she could hardly catch her breath. My father was wringing his hands. What if Yeonmi had fallen into the icy water and drowned? What if they'd never found her body? My parents told me they had to search for my sister immediately, so I had to check out the hospital right away. They found the doctors and pleaded with them until they finally took out my stitches. I was still too weak to walk, but Chun Gwen had come by the night before and offered to pick me up if I was released. I was so happy when he brought a friend with a motorcycle. The friend waited outside, and we were finally alone for a while in the hospital room. Chun Gwen finally admitted that he knew all about my family. Some jealous girls who had lived in his building found out that he was visiting me in the hospital, and they told him everything about my father being a criminal. But Chun Gwen said he didn't care. He still wanted me to marry him. But Chun Gwen, oh, I've read that already. He was such an optimistic person and so confident that he would make me the happiest person in the world. I told him nothing and just smiled. Yeah, that's enough of that. We're here to read a depressing book. He was... Oh, I read that. That seemed to be enough for him. Somehow, in my desperation, he was willing to offer me a little bit of warmth, light, and hope. I will always be grateful for that. We walked out of the hospital together, and his friend started up the motorcycle. Chun Gwen held on to me tightly as his friend drove slowly all the way to the building. I couldn't make it up the stairs, so Chun Gwen carried me up 8 flights to my apartment. He was very gallant for the first few floors. Then he started sweating. "You seem to be gaining weight," he said with a grin. I just smiled because it hurt too much to laugh. When we got to my door, I was still too ashamed to let him inside, where he could see how poorly we lived. So we said our goodbyes, and he was gone. When I walked into our room, I found my parents huddled together on the floor. There was no sign and no news of Yeonmi. My father was rocking back and forth, crying silently. He didn't care. He didn't dare make a noise because our neighbors would hear and know something was wrong. When they asked him where Yeonmi had gone, he said, "Oh, she's just staying with friends." They could not know the truth, or they would report us. So we waited that night, hoping Yeonmi would return, but fearing something terrible had happened to her. All kinds of thoughts went through our heads. Not knowing was the hardest thing. I was so tired and weak. I went to bed. And that's when I found a note from Yeonmi under my pillow. It said, "Go find this lady. She will bring you to China." She gave me the address of a house near the river, across from the Weon train station. The next morning, my parents went to see the family of the girl who had run away with Yeonmi. They brought the note with them. Then all of them went to the address Yeonmi had left. When a woman came to the door, my mother demanded, "Where is our daughter? Tell me what you've done with her." The woman shook her head. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. "I don't know your daughter." There was nothing they could do, so they went home. Days went by, and there was still no word from Yeonmi. On March 31st, my father sent my mother on an errand to do some business. I was still very weak, but I was feeling well enough to walk a little bit. So I went with her. She was planning to stop by Yeonmi's friend's house on the way to see if they've heard any news about the girls. When we arrived at the house, I think I hit the camera then. When we arrived at the house, it was like a funeral was going on. Everybody was crying, and the girl's mother was frantic and sick with grief. "It's all my fault," she cried. This is the girl, after all, Yeonmi, sister of the main character, went with a friend, escaped with a friend, and now they're at the friend's family's house, where all of their mother and father may not have known about the operation either, to escape. "It's all my fault," she cried. She said her daughter was hungry all the time and was never satisfied with what her mother gave her to eat. I always told her she ate too much. But if I'd known she was going to leave like this, I never would have said it. She couldn't stop sobbing. And her husband told her to please calm down. "You're going to die like this," he said. Quietly, he told my mother and me that it was better for his daughter to leave. She could not live in this country. And some of the other neighbor women were saying that they would go to China too if they had the chance. After we left the house, my mother came up with another strategy. She was still desperate to find out if Yeonmi had crossed into China safely. I suggested that we return to the broker's house alone and tell her that I wanted to go to China. We were hoping that the broker would let me in to look around, because for all we knew, my sister could still be inside the house. When I knocked on the door, the same woman answered. She was in her early 40s, like my mother, but she had a baby in her arms who she was still nursing. She dressed very poorly, and when I peeked inside the door, the house looked so run down it seemed like it might collapse at any moment. When she saw that I was alone, she suddenly became very friendly. When I told her I wanted to go to China, she said that could be arranged. When I called my mother over, the woman blocked the doorway and wouldn't invite us in. Too much. So we stood outside as we spoke. At this point, she didn't want to admit that she knew my sister, but she seemed more than eager to win our trust. "Just wait here," she said. She walked around the corner, and then she came back a little later and led us into an alley. There she introduced us to a pregnant woman who was quite friendly. "If you want, you can cross the river tonight," the pregnant woman said. I didn't know that at that very moment how much I wanted to leave North Korea. When I first knocked on the door, I didn't know. But right then and there, I made up my mind. I was going to China. And my mother was coming with me. Right now. It was not our original plan. My sister and I were supposed to go ahead without my mother. But now I knew I could not leave my mother behind. I grabbed my mother's hands and said, "We must go, Uma." Uma's a Korean sort of pet name for mother. It's like mama. "We must go, Uma. There may be another chance." But my mother tried to pull away. "Yeonmi, I can't leave your father. He's sick. You have to go by yourself." I held on to her and said, "No. If I let go of your hands, you're going to die in North Korea. I can't go if I leave you here." She begged me, "Just give me one chance to tell your father that I'm going. Then I'll come back." I wouldn't let her leave, not even to tell my father. He would find a way to stop her, or she would change her mind. I knew that if I let her out of my sight, I would never see her again. So I said everything I could to persuade her to go with me right now. I told her we would find Yeonmi and we could settle in China first, and then we would get father to come later. I still imagined that we could come back any time to wave my father across the river, just like those Chinese kids who used to ask me if I was hungry. But the most important thing, the only thing that really mattered, was that by tomorrow we wouldn't have to worry about food anymore. I gave her no choice. I was still holding my mother's hand when I said to the pregnant woman, "I'll go if mother can come too." "You can both go," she said. "What about my sister, Yeonmi?" I asked. "Will we find her there?" "I'm sure of it," said the woman. "Once you cross the river, all the North Korean people live in the same area, so you'll see her there." This made sense to us, because it's the way North Korea would be organized, with different people assigned to different areas. Ugh. We never thought to ask why these women were helping us, and why we didn't have to pay them anything. We didn't think that something might be wrong. Even though my mother worked in the black market, she trusted people. As North Koreans, we were innocent in a way that I cannot fully explain. For the rest of the day, we kept changing our location, with the pregnant woman making us wait outside different buildings on the outskirts of Hyesan. Finally, in late afternoon, we ducked into a public toilet, and we were given some very dark, thin clothes. I ate before I recorded. In order to change. The woman told us these clothes would make us look like the porters who smuggle goods across the river. That would be our story if we got caught. We would just say we were being paid to pick up packages in China, and that we planned to come right back. Then she disappeared, and two young men came out of the house. They led me and my mother down the side streets and back alleys on our way out of town. Now, they've mentioned Hyesan a couple of times. I think at the beginning of the book we have a small map of, yes, of North Korea. You probably can't see this very much, but there's a black dot up here. So this is obviously the border between, also the river as well, the Yalu River. It separates China. And also, interesting point, there's a tiny bit of Russia that actually connects. Though I'm not sure what Russia's agreement is when it comes to North Korean escaping people. But yeah, Hyesan is a city that's basically right on the border, so they're very close to the border with China. So this is where they are. All this is going on in Hyesan. Where are we? In fact, let's do that again. Seeing as we pointed out Hyesan. We kept changing our location with the pregnant woman making us wait outside different buildings on the outskirts of Hyesan. Finally, in late afternoon, we ducked into a public toilet. We were given the dark, thin clothes, ordered to change. These are the clothes that make us look like porters who smuggle goods across the river. This is their cover story. Then she disappeared. Two young men came out of the house. They led me and my mother down the side streets and the back alleys on our way out of town. They told us that if we travelled along the road, people would see us and there would be big trouble. So they took us on footpaths through the mountains. What we called those steep foothills where we went to gather wood, on a winding route back to the river. This was less than 2 weeks after my surgery, and I was already exhausted. The boys walked really fast, and after a while I couldn't bear the pain in my side, so I slowed them down a little. At first, just the two boys led us along the trails. Then another joined us. He was even younger than the other boys, but he acted like he was the boss. He gave us more instructions about what we should do when we get to China. When you cross the river, don't tell anybody your real age, he said. We've told the people on the other side that you are 18 and 28 years old. Whereas I think she's 13 at the moment, possibly 14. The main girl there. Her mother... Oh God, how old is her mother? I think she's either in her early 40s. Yes, her mother's in her 40s. So they're not 18 and 28. They are 13 and 40 something. We've told people on the other side you are 18 and 28 years old. They won't take you if you're too young or too old. That's why they had to bump up the 13-year-old to 18. They don't expect that, and it will be a problem, too. Oh, wait, I haven't read the reason why. Okay, we've told the people you are 18 and 28. They won't take you if you're too young or too old, and don't let them know that you are mother and daughter. They don't expect that, and it will be a problem, too. This seemed strange to me, but I had to trust these smugglers to know what was best to get us into China. By that time, we had walked all day, and it was getting dark. We hadn't had any food since the morning, and they gave us nothing to eat. At some point, the first two stopped and told us to follow the youngest one. He led us to the edge of a cliff. It was very dark, but we could see a big road below us and a steep bank to the frozen river. Follow me, the boy said, and whatever you do, don't make any noise. Part 2, China. Finally, after what, 3 years? I was busy. I won't waste your time. Life's been tough, but because we're reading a book of someone's life that's even tougher, it helps. It's certainly a way of putting your own issues into a perspective. We're on chapter 12. I'm going to leave it there because I've been yammering for 49 minutes. Chapter 12 is The Other Side of Darkness. And I'll try not to leave it 2 years for the next one. Now I just need to figure out where the stop button is on this thing. Is it this one? No, it's not that one. That's a chat. That's the chat menu, isn't it? Yeah. Jesus Christ, I'm not even a boomer, you know. There it is. I'm not even a boomer, I'm a fucking millennial. You think I'd know how to use this. Goodbye, everyone.